Santa Claus doing that Santa shuffle, belly full of jelly and a bag full of toys, rocking that red suit, shaking that big booty, dropping off goodies for good girls and good boys.
Giving gifts. Even the world knows that's what Christianity is all about. And that's why they know exactly what to do on Christmas Day. The whole world is waiting for that special moment where you offer your loved one a gift and they choose to accept or decline it. But you should know that the gift of salvation is not this way. You cannot choose to accept or decline the gift of faith. It comes upon you like the ending of a storm.
There's no reason just to accept the mystery of the function of man's free will. Point number 4. I accepted the fact that a gift doesn't have to be irresistibly applied in order for the giver to get full credit for giving it. According to Calvinism, God does not merely enable people to believe, as the scripture says.
Hopefully, if you have been following this video series, you are already able to recognize his error when he says, enable them to believe. What he means is, enable them to take the action of saying that they believe, when in reality, believing is inward confidence. So God gifts you with an inward confidence. Belief is not an action. You do not choose, like on Christmas morning, to open whether or not you believe something.
But he has to actually change their very nature so as to certainly make them believe. As a Calvinist, I remembered shaming other Christians for quote-unquote stealing God's glory by suggesting they played any role in the reconciliation process. Think about that. Reconciliation, the bringing together of two parties. Heaven forbid we actually think that both parties are involved in that.
Yes, heaven does forbid that, because heaven is a place of supreme logic, and that is very illogical. The reason it is illogical is because we are not talking about the reconciliation of two fleshly bodies. We are talking about the reconciliation of two spiritual bodies, God and man. One of those spiritual bodies is dead. Guess which one?
I insisted that the non-Calvinist would be boasting to believe that they chose to come to Christ unless they first admitted that God irresistibly changed their nature to make them want to come. I recall a wise elder from my home church challenging me on this point by asking the question, why do you believe God's choice of you, for no apparent reason, is less boastworthy than his choice of me for being a weak beggar?
And it was at that moment that you should have known he was not a weak beggar. Because a weak beggar doesn't say that he is a weak beggar. A weak beggar begs weakly. Just like someone who is humble doesn't say that they have humbled themselves. A truly humble person is constantly bringing what he perceives to be a lack of humility to God.
I honestly did not know what he meant at the time, but I do now. You see, at the time of that encounter, I had not reached the pigsty of my own life. I was young, I was arrogant. I had never really been broken by my sin and brought face to face with my depravity. I thought I understood forgiveness and grace, but truthfully, it was not until much later in life that I would be brought to the end of myself, so to speak. I used to think the idea that God chose to save me before I was born and done anything good or bad was humbling. But it was not near as humbling as a reality that God would choose to save me in the middle of my worst sin, my brokenness, my humiliation, and my shame. Like the prodigal who returned home from the pigsty of his life, broken and humiliated, seeking to beg for handouts, deserving nothing but punishment, receives instead the gracious love of a father. I too felt the choice of a father to forgive me right then and there in the middle of my filth.
Now, I was in a good mood, and I had a Christmas song going and everything, and you had to go and make me upset preaching a false gospel again, because God does not make a choice to forgive you when you come and ask for forgiveness. He made a choice to forgive you the moment he sent Christ to die on the cross. before the foundation of the world. That's the basis he forgives you on, what Christ did. But according to your system, Christ's work on the cross is completely irrelevant to God's decision. You're going to tell me that you, as a theologian, didn't notice while proofreading this video that you haven't mentioned the sacrifice of Christ not once in 4 20-minute rebuttals? All you want to talk about is how humble you are.
It was not some theological concept of God picking me for no apparent reason out of the mass of humanity at some distant, inexplicable time before time was. It was my Abba, my Dada.
And while that all sounds very emotionally compelling, the Bible is pretty clear that before we are adopted, we are children of wrath. We are sons of the devil.
Choosing to love me in the middle of my deepest sin and pride-crushing shame. No one, no Arminian, no Calvinist, or anyone in between, I mean no one, boasts about being forgiven like that.
And I mean no one. I'm not talking about just a few people, or not even just one person. I mean no person will tell a story about how they humbled themselves to come to salvation. Not one. Not one person will do it, will they, Leighton?
If they do, I doubt they've experienced the humility that God is asking us to come to Him with. If they do boast in such humility, or they think others would boast in that kind of humility, I cannot imagine they've ever experienced it themselves.
I'm actually feeling pretty confident that I don't even have to say anything at this point. You get it, right? You're hearing it, right?
Jeremiah 9:24 says, "But let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, declares the Lord." C.S. Lewis wrote, "A man can no more diminish God's glory by refusing to worship Him than a lunatic can put out the sun by scribbling the word darkness on the walls of his cell."
See, that's what you don't understand, man. You're right, but you don't know why you're right. You can't diminish God's glory, even if you don't worship Him. Why? Because when you don't worship Him and He sends you to hell and punishes you for that, He's justified in doing it, and He is glorified for taking out His wrath on you.
Point number 5.